Welcome. You are at the CCC.
Where there are no outside issues. My name's Anthony. I'm an addict and an alcoholic, another bozo on the bus, and I care about you.
Yes, and I'm LouLou, and my pronouns are he and him. And my pronouns, I'm in recovery for crystal meth alcohol, and I'm in recovery.
This is his first day. It's his first day. It's his first day, everyone.
Yes, and I'm always in search of balance. Yes, and each week we strive to create a brave space where we can engage in conversation around topics of recovery.
And our intention is to hold and inspire better spaces for more people in recovery by tackling issues sometimes used to baffle us. Oh my God, that was not the right line.
To baffle, yes, but
separate us.
Before we do that, please like, share, comment, and rate this episode.
You know what? That whole time I was like, I'm going to do mine better than he did. And then I did the wrong word.
I know. I don't know what's happening. I was literally, there was like an echo coming from, I was like,
is that what it was?
I would say that, no, not an echo. I was the echo.
You were
I'm in recovery for crystal alcohol, and I'm in recovery for
And here are my pronouns. And here are my pronouns. All right. And now the disclaimer. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on At the CCC are ours alone. We do not represent anyone but ourselves. The information and content shared here is for general information purposes only. In other words, we're just a couple of friends behind a mic here to entertain you.
Absolutely. I think that we're doing this deliberately because of our ideas to kind of maybe pre-record it.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. But let's not talk. Let's not talk that right now. Okay. But we've been talking about pre-recording it. But before we go on, we have this illustrious guest with us today. Her name is Anke. She's a good friend of both of ours. We absolutely love her. She's been a fan favorite.
Yes.
We are your fans,
and
you are our favorite. Yes. Yeah. No, we are your fans. Anke, introduce yourself. How are you? Who are you?
I'm great. I'm happy to be here. My name is Anke, and I am in recovery from alcohol.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. And I've been in recovery for a long time, more than 3 decades. And I am.
How long is a decade? Is that 10 years?
Yes.
I'm kidding. That's over. You've been sober for over 30 years?
35, God willing, next month.
Holy shit. God bless you.
Well,
wow.
You know what that means, though. It just
that you're drunk right now. What does it mean?
It just means that I haven't died.
Yeah, that's right.
I haven't died. That's all that means, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Anke, well, it's really nice to have you on.
Absolutely.
It's long overdue.
Thank you.
And before we jump in, we have the 3 questions we ask all of our guests. So our rules are 3 questions in 3 minutes.
Okay.
To answer those questions. So first question is, where are you from?
Originally, I was born in Germany.
Whoa.
German parents.
Okay.
And my stepfather, who adopted me when I was 2, decided he wanted to be in America, immigrated into America, became an American citizen, joined the army, and then we traveled with him. Like once he.
Are you an army brat?
I am.
Oh.
So most of the time we spent, my father was deployed in Germany, minus the time that he was deployed in Vietnam. But most of the time I was like moving from school to school every few years throughout Germany. And then we ended up in Massachusetts.
Now I just want to talk about you for the rest of the episode.
Exactly.
I have so many questions. Okay. That's very interesting. Mm-hmm. So
okay.
That was the best transition that I could come up with. So the second question is, what made you get sober?
Okay. I think, like many of us, it was an act of surrender and saving my own life. I mean, I got sober when I was 27, and by that time I had already been in situations where I should have been dead.
Of course.
Or killed other people as a result of my drunk driving.
Right.
And there was just a moment of awareness one day when I was coming out of a blackout early in the morning during a nor'easter in Massachusetts. I'm driving and I almost got into an accident, and it was just this moment of like, the gig is up. I cannot live like this anymore. And at the time I was going to Al-Anon, and I had a friend who was in both programs who I called when I got home, and I said, I need help.
Yeah.
And that's when I went to my first meeting that night, and been coming ever since.
Nice.
Wow, that is the most coherent share I've heard in a long time. Yeah, exactly. You had the perfect arc. You had experience, strength, and hope. I love that, Anke. I think Jaylon's looking for speakers at some point.
Okay,
Jaylon's
all
in
right.
Jaylon's here. So then our last question is, what's your relationship with your higher power?
So for me, it's been an evolution. It's been evolving, my relationship with the God of my understanding. It's certainly changed from when I first got sober, when I was really young. And as I grow in understanding and effectiveness in this program, it continues to evolve along with me, this concept of a power greater than myself.
Yeah.
I used to think that it was a persona, like this person in the sky that had a personality and like arms and legs. Like this is, a concept that I had, but now it's shifted. For me, it's more like my concept of a power greater than myself is that cohesive energy that binds everything together, that is metaphysical and it's all encompassing and it resides in me. And I used to think that a higher power existed outside of me and that I needed to be a certain way in order to get access to that, when in fact it was in me all the time.
Of course,
like that line out of The Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
It was in you all the time.
Yeah.
So that's
I didn't know that was from The Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
That is quite beautiful. I don't think I've ever heard someone describe God as something that wasn't like personified. Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. Mm. Yeah. Again, I just want to talk about you now.
Okay.
Yeah.
But how are you doing, Anthony?
I'm okay. I'm just getting over something. I was we went to Half Moon Bay. By we I mean my partner and I. We went to Half Moon Bay, and then I don't know if maybe it was allergies or what it was, but it was like very quick, and now I'm just like it's all the residuals. Other than that, I'm fine. I have the second to last interview tomorrow. I have an interview tomorrow morning, and then I have an interview in a couple of weeks, and I have like really exciting stuff happening professionally and personally, and that's what's up with me. How about you, Louis?
I'm good. So I almost used up all of my check-in talking to Anke, but earlier. The situation that happened with one of your sponsees at the conference coming up. Sunday, I had a young man come up to me who listens to the podcast regularly.
No,
and who wasn't really involved in the program.
Oh,
but was going to Kaiser, and he came up and said, "Oh my gosh, it's like I never thought I'd see you in person."
Oh,
it's
no,
like,
you're
a YouTube star. It's like I listen to the podcast all the time, and of course, what's going through my head. It's like, I'm not those things, but. Thank you. This is really cool. No, but it was really nice because I think that it is kind of a affirmation of what we're doing here and why we're doing it, because we don't know who and how we reach them, but the fact that we get to reach them, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I see this as an extent, like this to me, and then we can go into the topic, of course, but I see I see what we do as the same thing that happens when you're sitting in a meeting and you share and someone hears something, you know, and I feel so encouraged by this podcast and by the people who listen to us, because my goal whenever I'm behind the mic is to be as raw and as vulnerable as possible.
Absolutely.
And I find that, that happens to resonate sometimes with people, and then people write in. Anyway, I think we're doing God's work. I really yelled into the mic. I'm so sorry for people at home. But so Anke, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thank you. I've
been
excited all week about coming in and trying not to get nervous, but and I had also this fangirl moment, like your friend, when I first discovered this podcast, I was listening to you guys and I thought you guys were like, oh my God, they're so smart. And if these guys were my friends, this would be great, because I've always thought of this podcast as being like, like a hangout with my most emotionally intelligent friends having a combo, right?
Really? You thought that?
I did. I honestly did.
Then we did our job.
I honestly thought that. And then one day I was walking down Castro Street and I saw LouLou sitting outside.
I was working at Burger King.
Well, were you really?
No.
Outside of Cliffs, and I walked by because I was so nervous. I'm like, that's the guy. It's the guy from the podcast.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Well, I didn't know if I should say hi because I was all nervous, and then I made myself turn around and talk to Louis and just thank him for that. Like,
that's so funny. You know what that reminds me of is like one of the things, because people. what I want to say, the punchline of what I want to say is like, we all have to take a shit. That's the punchline of what I want to say. That basically that there is this weird way that like when you get behind a camera or like, there's it, but yet we're all just literally bozos on a bus.
Yeah. Oh, that's
all bozos.
I said that
earlier.
Yeah.
It must have downloaded from the ether.
Yeah. We're just bozos on a bus. So today's
what you're saying is that you're not a pillar?
We're going to leave that one alone. That's a throwback. So today's topic is mind-body connection. And the reason why we have Anke on is because Anke engaged in a project. She produced a 1-episode coverage of mind-body connection, and she did this exhaustive look at looking back into scholarly research and was tracing basically how that conversation has evolved and how it's become what it is today. Would you say that's a fair characterization?
Yes, I would. Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that project and what made you want to work on that?
Yeah, so I'm a second-year grad student in counseling psychology, and this was a final project I did for one of my classes on the topic was like spiritual psychotherapy and exploring darkness, like the shadow.
Wait, what?
Yes.
Oh my God. That's so cool.
I know. And I had already finished all of my academic coursework, and I just took this as an elective because it was just so interesting to me. I'm very interested in mind-body connection stuff. And so I did, like you said, I did a lot of research, and I had the opportunity several years ago to go to the Mind-Body Conference at Harvard Medical School, and the founder of the Mind-Body Institute at Mass General was there as a keynote speaker, as was a man named John Kabat-Zinn, and many other prominent leaders in sort of like epigenetics.
Yeah.
And so ever since then, I've been really interested in how the mind-body connection manifests, especially if we link it together, like what we do in the 12 steps, and how that all kind of pans out. And it's, it's a passion of mine. And I'm right now I'm steering more into epigenetics and how we have agency over how our genes express by the lifestyle that we live.
And can you explain, say, like to a person who's not familiar with epigenetics, what is epigenetics?
Yeah, so epi, it means over, right? Okay. On top of, and genetics means that your I don't know, your bio makeup, like what you get from your mom, your dad, those genes and
the ingredients,
the ingredients, right? And so we all have some genes that express and some genes that don't express, and we have recessive genes and dominant genes, and it's all part of this. How we're made up. And so in terms of expression of genes, like there's a connection with stress and disease, right? And so that's mainly what I'm interested in. And during my years as an occupational therapist, I've seen every single manifestation you can imagine on how some people's genes express in a certain way that creates disease because of either trauma or chronic stress. And one of the things that comes to mind really quickly is diabetes type 2.
Oh, right.
Which is like a lifestyle disease, right? We call it. Because
as I drink my sugary coffee.
Well, and that's another thing. Is it's like we live in a culture where we're bombarded with advertisements, and then there's the big sugar and the food industry, keeping us hooked on all these ingredients that aren't good for us, processed foods, and that also contributes to how the mind body expresses, right? How these genes express after a while.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that I think about epigenetics and its connection to stress, or just stress in general, and how stress affects our lives, is that excuse me, that when we think of epigenetics and we're thinking about the things that express. So another way I think of this is like, if I'm making a cake and I put certain ingredients in that cake, there's certain ingredients that might stand out, right? Especially if it's a fancy cake. And, there's certain things that can impact whether or not the cake rises. So, for example, if you're in high altitude, maybe you're right, like certain things it might impact whether or not like the cake can, rise all the way. And so the takeaway being that with my understanding, the simplest understanding that I have of epigenetics is how does the environment impact what is expressed, right? And so, for example, when you have, when a person is inside, they're an ovum, they're inside, a woman's pregnant and she has certain stressors in her life. There are different things that can impact the certain expression of different genes.
Absolutely.
Right. And so, but going to the connection to say like things like diabetes or stress in general is that we see this with a lot of people in recovery who, when they have a lot of stressors growing up, be it trauma or trauma, which is, manifests in a bunch of different ways, that has a way of also impacting the mind-body connection.
Absolutely. Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so can you give us like a kind of like a rundown, kind of like in a brief way, what are some of the things that you discovered along the way in your research that you think relate to recovery specifically?
So there's a lot of information out there right now about like trauma and what that means and how that affects our bodies. And for a long time, people like Louise Hay.
Oh,
Are
sure.
you familiar with Louise Hay?
The name sounds familiar.
Okay, she's passed now, but she wrote the book You Can Heal Your Life, and she was popular back in the 70s, and she did these things called affirmations, right? Which was kind of a new thing back then. Like people were like, "Oh, she's all woohoo," and she was not really taken very seriously until some of the research came out from places like the Mind Body Institute and Herbert Benson and his work. And Dr. John Sarno and his work, that there is actually something to that. The way that we talk to ourselves and these beliefs that we hold, right? Belief gives meaning, and meaning is sort of a way of being in the world. And what we subscribe to eventually, we manifest, right? I know that sounds woohoo, but there are certain biomarkers now that we see in research where we can substantiate what Louise Hay has proposed.
Can I pause you?
Yes.
And I feel like there's a direct connection between what you're describing and what people find in the fourth step, right? A lot of what people find in the fourth step has to do with beliefs.
Yes.
Right? Beliefs of themselves, beliefs of other people. And there's this way, I'm bringing the connection to fourth step to make it more tangible, I think, for folks who may struggle with substance or process addictions, that, this idea that we might have a belief, and who put those beliefs there, right? I think that's part of it too, which some of that can come from the environment, like the kind of society at large, or it can come from microenvironments, so like relationships with our parents.
Or trauma.
Or trauma, right?
Right.
Or trauma.
And I like that you brought that up, because I do believe that if you're working a 12-step program, right, you have the opportunity to reset your genetic code, believe it or not. And I'm saying that because it's true. But
is that a spiritual awakening?
Yeah. Well,
Ooh.
yes.
Yeah.
A psychic change.
A psychic change.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do
Say
believe,
more about that.
I do believe that. Okay. So let's think about trauma, right? And let's think about if you've got the trauma, chances are there's a resentment there. Am I right?
Ooh, I need to chew on that. If there's a trauma, there's probably resent.
Whether
let's say
it's
that,
conscious or not, there's a resentment there. If you've got especially complex childhood trauma, I do believe that's true. So if we're going through our fourth step, we've surrendered, we've done 1, 2, and 3. We're writing out those resentments, but we're also looking at where have I been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or afraid, right? So we get to sort of unpack that trauma and then have agency over it by virtue of doing the fourth step.
Can I pause you there? What I love about the way you're describing it is that when you take a traumatic event or a resentment and you parcel it out, you break it up that way, you're adding nuance to something that at one point felt very concrete.
Yes.
Go
And you
ahead.
have an opportunity to reframe that experience and have agency over that. Whereas before, if you have trauma, and as we know, trauma resides in the body. If you're familiar with the work of Mr. Van der Kolk, who wrote the book, The Body
Keeps the score.
Yes. So it lives inside us. But once we have the opportunity to write it out, it's on paper. It comes out, right? And we get to dissect it. We get to reframe it. We get to look at it and have agency over it. Like, where was I afraid?
Right.
And that I feel like that place where you find that agency, that's when the healing starts, because you've got something to grasp. I have always talked about, I tried to change like language, like I didn't use good or bad or whatever. I just said high or low. And this is 4-step stuff. When I got to the point where I realized that I had a part in everything, that was empowering and esteemable.
Right.
Because all of a sudden it's like, whoa, it's like, it may not have been my highest choice, but it was my choice. Yeah. And getting to that place where you realize, oh, whoa. So I wasn't just a innocent bystander, or I wasn't just observing, I was participating.
You were not a victim.
Yeah, I wasn't a victim. Yeah.
One of the things that I absolutely love about the 4th step, at least when I think about myself, is that up until that point, it was everyone's fault.
Yeah.
It was the world. The world was unfair to me. If only. And so I had all of these reasons. And so the second I did a 4th step, and for folks unfamiliar with 4th step, basically what you're doing is you're taking a fearless moral inventory of yourself. All that means is you're looking at all the things that have hurt you, and then you're trying to look at, making then the connection between what's yours and what belongs to the world, Yeah. So that's as simple as I can put it. And so what's great after I did the 4th step is that no longer was I defenseless, because I had something that was mine that I could hold on to, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where the change came from. So one of the things that's on my 4th step, for example, which is rooted in beliefs. I love what you said about if there's trauma, there's a resentment there. Mm-hmm. That's so good. I'm going to take that home with me.
Well, every time when I'm trying to explain the idea of a resentment to my sponsees, I'm like, think of those things that, when you think about it, does it still affect you?
Right.
Because if I've made peace with something, I don't. It could be on a billboard in front of me, and it will not affect me.
That's right.
As opposed to reliving the resentment, because you can feel it, right? Yeah. You can feel that anger come up or that pain come up, right?
Yes,
so we're reliving that, and that's what Van der Kolk says when it stays in you, but through the alchemy of writing it out and looking at it, you have just freed yourself, right?
That's right.
So what you're saying is, like, for those of you, like I have shown up here at the club and I've seen people doing 4-step work on their computer. I'm old fashioned.
Yeah.
Let's write that down.
Yeah.
Let's put pen to paper, and you can put it on the computer later for preservation, but let's get all of that. Anyway, that was just my sidebar.
No, I love your sidebar. But Anke, can I go ahead?
Yeah. No, I was just thinking as you were saying that, it's true, because there's this thing in our nervous system called the corticospinal tract, which governs fine motor control, and it's a direct connection to our brain. So you're actually, this is a tool. Like you're letting it out.
Like Mr. Miyagi, it's like paint up, paint down.
Wax on, wax off. So you talked about how there was that beliefs that was one of the first kind of connections between mind and body was beliefs.
Right.
Okay, and then what came after looking at beliefs? Was there something else you wanted to add to that?
I don't remember now.
Okay, so there was the looking at beliefs first,
right?
Okay, and then go on.
So looking at unpacking trauma, and getting it all out on paper, and then after you have gotten it out and you're telling another human being your experience, and you're moving on. By the time you get to the 9th step, it says in the book somewhere, I don't remember where, but it says, at this point we've digested some good chunks of truth about ourselves. So you're getting to know yourself and your own mind, body better, right? At this point, you're armed with knowledge.
It's that piece right after. It's the piece right after the 5th step. Like when you say go, where I thought the 6th and 7th were super simple, where it said, now you've taken this stuff in, but go and process it and figure out.
That's right. And for folks listening, if any thoughts are coming up for you, you have any questions or comments, please share them. Please share them. So go on. Okay.
Yeah. So, I can just say just from my own experience how freeing the whole process has been for me, and how different now I look at the world and how I look at my relationships with other people, and I'm much more comfortable in my own skin. I'm not saying that things don't happen. I mean, I'm human, and I butt heads with people at work. I'm not the most pleasant person at work sometimes, because I have
there's Louis.
my opinions on things, right? Yeah. And but I do try to stay true to what I believe is the truth, and there's a certain I do believe that there's a certain level of integrity that comes with having gone through the process, and it just, for me, it's been life changing. I also know that in terms of healing from trauma, some of us need to go to professional help.
I was thinking about that, because when we apply what you were talking about to the steps, it's a lower, in my mind, a lower level of trauma that maybe can be addressed without going to someone who because I always think, especially when we drive up on the 4-step, when I drive up on the 4-step with a new sponsee, I'm on, okay, so I'm going to be rattling this cage and bringing out stuff that we maybe thought we never have to address again. And I am not professional enough to know how to contain it or to put it in that space, or what's your word? Container.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
And this is, and I'm like, this is the time when, if you aren't already thinking about outside help, that you want to kind of start engaging, because it can be the marriage of doing the work with a sponsor and then continuing the harder stuff with the therapist can be life altering.
Yes, and I strongly believe in therapy, because there is some trauma that really we're not qualified. We're not qualified. I mean,
working with a sponsor.
Well.
When you say we're not qualified, what do you mean?
I as a sponsor, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
In a professional context, at some point, I'm going to be doing it professionally. But as a sponsor, I am not the person, right?
That's right.
Because there's childhood trauma, there's sexual abuse, there's physical abuse, there's all kinds of stuff that really should be brought to a clinician in order to process.
That's right.
Because we don't want to do more damage if we're not.
I want to get your opinion on something.
Okay.
So
I also have a comment.
Oh, we have a comment?
We have a...
Let's see that comment.
Oh, but J-Lo! Oh, my God. So I believe my relationship to my trauma has changed as a result of working a 4-step. Having the awareness that I do now post 4-step has lowered the intensity and reactivity to situations that used to really trigger me. Outside help has played a major role in this.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that, Jaylon.
Thank you.
I love it. Jaylon is just representing from behind us.
Yeah. Well, what I love the most about this is that it's basically a testament to what it's like, what can happen when you do the work. And doing the work is not easy. It's uncomfortable. So to my question, I want to get your opinion, both of you, on this. Is so one of the things that I've noticed over the last few years is that there are people who come in and they do the work, but they're chronic relapsers, right? And what I've noticed about all of those people is that if you hear their stories, it is clear that they're carrying a lot of pain with them, right? And you can tell those people, hey, you'll get through this, right? And you can tell them, you know what, maybe you need to see a therapist. And sometimes they will and sometimes they won't, right? I know one person in particular, they started doing therapy, but they were even resistant to the therapy. So I'm wondering, and I know y'all have seen these type of people too, what are your thoughts about that? Do you have any solutions or ideas or thoughts?
Well, I would say that I have to remind myself sometimes that they too have a higher power.
That's right.
And I'm not it. And I have to sort of turn things over to their higher power sometimes. Because if I've said, hey, get yourself to a meeting, or hey, I can meet you for coffee, or maybe you need outside help, and I make suggestions and they're not taking it, it's their right not to take it. And sometimes they have to play out their own destiny, whatever that is. And it's not for me to say what's right or wrong for that person. Maybe their destiny is to not get sober. I don't know that, but I do pray and I do hope, for anybody who is struggling with alcohol and or drugs or process addictions or whatever it is, food addictions. It's my hope that people get better because we have the tools, right? We have them.
Right.
And it's heartbreaking to see people struggle like that and continue to come in and out. It really is. But everybody gets to make their own decisions about that.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add to that because I believe my sponsor is constantly reminding me that, everyone has a higher power and I need to let that process play out. But what I was thinking about, to that is when we talk about some people are constitutionally incapable and it goes deep because whatever it is, it's so much. And for me personally, so that I allow people to have their humanity, I'm constantly thinking, we don't have to do anything we don't want to do. Mm-hmm. I may not agree with it, but it is not for me to decide that somebody should have what I have because I think it's right for them. Thank God, because if I had control over, I would have a velvet rope at the door with a list of you can't come in because
you
I don't
can get
think
sober,
you're
but you can't get sober.
No.
You can get sober.
Exactly.
I am so grateful that I don't make decisions for other people.
That is such a good point. It reminds me of a thing that I learned when I was a young occupational therapy clinician in my first job at St. John's Hospital in Lowell, Massachusetts, and we were getting hip patients out of bed post-op day one, me and this physical therapist who I adored. His name was Stephen. And, Stephen had been around a little bit longer.
We have a Stephen, too.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
So Stephen had been around a little bit longer than me. And anyway, I would get horrified, because the hip patients in particular had certain protocols and hip precautions they were supposed to adhere to when they got out of bed, and some of mine wouldn't do it. And I'd be horrified, and I'd run to Steve and I'd say, Mrs. So-and-so in room such and such, she didn't follow the hip. And I told her, and he said to me, I'm going to tell you something that I hope that will stick with you for the rest of your career. And he said, everybody, and I mean everybody, has a right to make their own bad decisions. Mm. And that was like a light went off, in my head. I'm like, oh, okay. And at that point I realized that I can say my stuff. I can be the clinician. I can document things and present them, but everybody has agency over their own life, including people who are chronic relapsers. Right?
That's right. There's this story that's told by Ram Dass, R.I.P., where he said there was this man who had a son who was a paraplegic, and he wanted to protect his son from people who would gawk at him and people who would say things to him, right? And so he asked Ram Dass, what should I do? How can I better protect him? And Ram Dass said, we all have our own life's curriculum. We can't protect people from the lessons they have to learn.
Yes.
And that's very hard for me. I think in part because who wants to see loved ones suffer, but I have to believe on some level that everyone does have a sense of what's right and wrong. And when they don't have a sense of what's right and wrong for themselves, and by right and wrong, let me make that more nuanced. The things that they know will benefit them, right? Like eating and sleeping.
Right.
And not eating and sleeping, right? Mm-hmm. And if they aren't able to make that distinction, then they truly are constitutionally incapable.
Absolutely. I remind myself that, my beliefs, everything that I am, I can't take that and put it on somebody else and then judge them based on that.
That's right.
I have to kind of remember that what I think might be good or bad, if I'm using good or bad, may not be for other people. And knowing that, I get to find my peace and my peace of mind a lot sooner, knowing that I'm in my loop. I don't have to worry about how the world's working over for Anthony because I know that I'll be,
You guys sound like you're black belts in Al-Anon. I just want to say right now.
I am in Al-Anon, but I haven't gone to a meeting in over a year.
But I'm
in other programs. I'm in other programs.
Yeah, I've recently acknowledged that I have Al-Anon stuff, but I refuse to go to a meeting.
Yeah, I've also been in therapy all my life.
Exactly.
There was something else here that I wanted to point to, but I can't remember. But Anke, you had another thought?
I was thinking of things like inflammation, right?
Oh, sure.
And how, stress can exacerbate inflammation in the body. And things like diabetes is considered inflammation, kidney disease, heart disease, obesity, all those things are considered inflammatory responses. Mm-hmm. And I always think that this is another result of trauma. Like when people, for example, use food.
Of course,
that's lately my thing too, because I tend to use food as a way to not feel or distract myself from feelings. And I've been doing some research now on, clean eating and what it means to be sober eating, which I think is more of an OA term. Yeah. But I do see patterns that sort of mimic my alcohol use. At the end of the day, I deserve that bag of chips, or I don't want to feel this feeling. I had a rotten day at work. I had an altercation with somebody. I'm going to pulverize some Cheetos right now. And so these habits that I get into don't serve me, and I know they cause inflammation. And I've seen again the effects that food has on certain bodies as a result of my career, and especially things like type 2 diabetes, which is so prevalent in our culture right now. And we're not getting a lot of support from the media, obviously. Yeah. They want us to keep consuming these foods and the sugar industry and big food. Mm-hmm. So I think that, for me, I'm just trying to take matters into my own hands right now and practice what I call clean eating. And it hasn't been easy.
I wanted to comment and say, this is how insidious our addiction is.
Yes.
Because it latches onto something like food that we need to survive.
Literally anything.
If it could find a way to make me overdo water, I probably would.
I was thinking about that a second ago.
Because it's a disease, isn't it? In the DSM,
to drink too much water?
Yes, there's something. There's a term for it.
I can't think of it.
I'll think of it later. But yes, you're right.
Yeah, but it's literally. I was, as you were talking, Anke, I was thinking about how I know at my core that I'm an addict and an alcoholic, because it could be anything. When I was a kid, it was fantasy. I loved retreating to fantasy, or food, or spending, or anything to not be in myself.
Absolutely.
It's interesting. And I feel one of the symptoms of that is, so I was showing you an app. So my partner wants me to do this 32-day central nervous reset. Which is the thing that I was showing you. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to me because I have a meditation practice, but I have such a resistance to actually getting my body to just stay put, which to me is always how my addiction has manifested. Anytime that I've had a relapse, and thank God I haven't had one recently, there's always some type of discomfort, right? There's always this kind of frantic vibrating that's happening in my body and the only way, and the solution is always outside of myself.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. As opposed to meditation, prayer. And I think that's where Bill was so before his time. When he was writing the 12 steps, and we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with that power greater than us. And I also want to add, before we run out of time, that now that we've substantiated and we have the research, we know that consistent meditation can actually change the structure of our gray matter in our brain.
Yes.
And I love that because when we're in fight or flight and we've had all this trauma, right? Our amygdala and our hippocampus they're overworked, right? And they're hair trigger. And that's why many people who've had trauma, they have these.
Can you tell us a little bit about the significance of the amygdala?
So those are the fight or flight responses, and that's where where we hold our trauma, so to speak. That's where we're in fight or flight. And those two organs in our brain dictate our fight or flight responses. And a lot of times when we're in that, our blood pressure goes up, heart rate increases, we start to sweat, and we can have those same emotional responses to trauma that's been repressed or when we reprocess a resentment, right? So we've got data now.
Can you repeat that last part? I think we all need to hear that, when we reprocess a resentment.
Yes, when we reprocess
when we're like replaying it, going back.
You can actually put somebody on like vital sign monitoring and see how their blood pressure goes up, how their heart rate increases, their sweat glands activate, because it does have a physiological response. That resentment.
Your blood literally boils.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what leads to inflammation in the body. All of those cortisol, all of those hormonal responses, you're flooding your body with cortisol, right? And that leads to more inflammation. So it's this vicious cycle. We have data now that, like I was trying to say earlier, is that we can measure the response in the brain. And when we do functional MRIs, fMRIs, we see that the hippocampus and the amygdala and certain structures in the brain actually look different after a certain amount. It's usually 6 to 8 weeks of regular meditation. The hippocampus and the amygdala start to grow like this other layer. There's an additional layer, which gives us pause. Like when before we could react, like certain responses, like the Pavlovian response to trauma or whatever, now we have the ability to say, wait a minute, I'm going to take a step back here. I'm not going to like lash out. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to go talk to somebody. And that's the benefit of meditation. And that's why I was saying Bill was ahead of his time.
Right.
Like this is an alchemy. This is a way to really change our outlook on life, and really, like those words in the book come true, the promises. And the promises is after step 9. If we have been painstaking about this part of our development, it's after the 9th step, when we've gone and we've made restitution and we become, again, part of the human race.
That's so beautifully said. That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for that, Anka. The only thing that I would add is that, and it doesn't have to be an hour-long meditation or a 5-minute, that you can really start with 5 seconds. Yes. All it takes is to have the willingness to do something different during those moments when you feel like so charged. You can just say, for 5 seconds, I am not going to react. And that's,
I love that.
And that's where it can start.
Yeah. Yes. And even Eckhart Tolle says, one conscious breath is a meditation, right?
That's when I was first learning meditation. There was a guru who said, it was Vipassana, so using the breath as the thing that you're focusing on. He said, if you could do it for just one breath, you've already succeeded.
Yes.
If you can bring your attention to your breath just for one breath,
that makes me feel good, because I've been like, I'm one of those folks that thought I had to, if I was going to do meditation, it would have to be Vipassana.
Yeah.
I'd have to spend a whole weekend quiet and breathing.
Can I tell you just quickly before we start winding down? Did I ever tell you either one of you about how, like, when I first started doing meditation, so on my birthday, I remember I was like, I'm sober now and I'm going to do an all-day retreat. Did I ever tell you about this?
Did I ever tell you about this? Please tell us.
Oh my God. So there was this one, so I was like, being super fucking alcoholic. I'm like, I'm going to do this like a whole day meditation on my birthday. And I was like telling friends about it, and they're like, girl, are you really? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. It's like, it's going to ground me. And I went, and it was dreadful. Because first off, that's very hard, right? I went from like doing 15, 20 minutes, at most an hour. And then I'm like, now I'm doing it for like 8 hours. And then after I was done, I did tell you this story. And then I reached out to my friends and like, all right, girl, are you done now? Do you want to come out and have dinner with us? So let's start winding down.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Castro Country Club is a safe and sober community center for all people and a refuge for the LGBTQ recovery community.
Do you want to take that one, Anke?
We provide programs and services that help people change their lives by supporting personal growth.
Go ahead.
Our vision is to reduce the suffering of addiction by connecting people to community, opportunity, and support.
Yes, and you can find more information, including all of the ways to contact us, at www.castrocountryclub.org. /podcast.
Hey, very well done. And there is another one, isn't there?
Yeah. Tune in.
Should I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Tune in every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time when we go live in our Castro Country Club Facebook and YouTube channels.
Find us wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, so we're still recording. Yeah, we did do it. Yeah.
Is this the after show?
This is the after show.
How'd it go?
You're being recorded still, though.
Yes.
Good.
Can we turn off the lights? Can we just make that a thing that we do now? No.
Anthony's such a diva. It's like, come on. Yeah. Can we turn
love how Brandon's arms are crossed on each other.
No.
Anthony's all. Can we turn off the lights and maybe
Can we please? And can someone fetch me a coffee?
Get me a soft drink. Yes.
You guys are assholes.
That was so cool. You know what? Okay, so I started.
Anke, thank you.
I know, Anke.
Thank you.
That was amazing.
I was so glad to be able to come.
I keep telling you to do this because when you go away, like,
I'm sorry. I'm not a professional.
Well, we want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
But sorry. Thank you, Steve. You're my new bestie.
I know. So the conversation started, and I was like, oh God, it's like I'm going to be over here smiling pretty and not saying anything.
I could sense that from you, and I was like,
but I realized, no. That's fine because I am like a sponge, and I realized
he is pretty.
No,
but sponges are pretty.
I know exactly.
So
I'm like a sponge because you notice, like, after I got over myself, because after I got past that and realized I'm just going to listen and figure out, the fact that as much as I think I'm lost or whatever, I saw a connection and I was able to kind of bring that, and so no, I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. I mean, this is what it's about. I want to leave like knowing more than I came,
Yeah.
Can I say something to that? You're reminding me so I had a clinical supervisor say to me, and I had this experience in my first years of grad school where basically what I was reminded of is that everything we need to know, we already know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Everything we need to know, we already know.
So basically, if you're telling me something I don't need to know, it's like, girl, stop talking.
No. Because I think there are these ways that, like, especially when it comes to like scholarship or like academic stuff, that there's like language that's used and it makes it really inaccessible when in fact there are no new ideas. A lot of, like, for example, when we talk about like cognitive behavioral therapy, that shit has its origins in Buddhism.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And, mindfulness practices and stuff like that. So what I want to say to like you and everyone is that what was useful for me is like I had multiple clinical supervisors say to me, everything that we're really learning is unlearning. Yeah. And one of the things we're unlearning is the self-doubt piece that that's the stuff that we have to unlearn. Yeah. That's it.
I think there's something to be said about innate wisdom.
Sure.
That we all have, that we have access to. And the way to get there, I do think, is through stillness, right?
That's right.
I think that there's that wisdom, that inner, I don't know what it is, like that inner, Louise Hay called it your inner ding, She got ridiculed for coining that term. But, there's these, like, how it says in the book, we will intuitively know how to handle situations.
Yeah. Or like Oprah's aha.
The aha moment.
Oprah. Well, yes. And so there is that moment where you have that, like, you're making connections and you're going by your gut feeling. Like, right?
Intuition, instinct.
And I think that all of the addictions and all of the stuff that we do, as addicts and alcoholics, like, it just covers up that intuition, right? It covers that up. Yeah.
And one of the things, my favorite description of intuition is borrowed from Freud, and I'm paraphrasing, but basically, like, intuition is the culmination of all of your experiences coming together in order to arrive at insight. Right. So I
love that.
Right. Isn't that great?
That is great.
So intuition is, and when you think about intuition in that way, it makes every single life experience you've had valuable.
Everything is grist for the mill.
Well, that's what I say. It's like,
and the way you get to it is by being quiet. Sorry, Louis, that wasn't.
No.
By being quiet, Louis.
No, but that's what we say in the church and everywhere. Like you were saying before, like, all the language is the same. Sometimes it's just not accessible. It's like nothing that I have is junk. Like
that's right.
Right.
What it may be my darkest experience and my experience that I have a hard time talking about that helps someone in a time when they can't hear anything else.
That's right.
And that reminds me of the hero's journey. Right?
Yes.
What's the guy's name?
Joseph
Campbell. Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey, and like how we're all basically on a hero's journey. And I do think that the 12 steps are a way to sort of come full circle with that, because Joseph Campbell talks about slaying the dragon. The dragon is that like part of ourselves, that dark night of the soul part of ourselves, and that fear. That whatever it is that we don't think we can do, or that thing that we can't.
Currently, the dragon is Anthony, because it's like
I told you from the beginning that I
had this image.
Dreams about Anthony's.
By the end,
because I want people to hear you.
No, by the end, I had this image of by the end of this episode, Anke's going to have the mic down her throat.
I might eat the mic.
Well, because the natural inclination is not like everyone's natural inclination is once they start to get into a thought, they get comfortable, and so they start leaning back, and then that's the point where you want people to hear you.
Yes. So the hero's journey.
The hero's journey.
And so that's what I think, if we can parallel the 12 steps to the hero's journey, because I think each of us, by virtue of going through the steps, are on a hero's journey.
Absolutely.
And we're on our journey back to ourselves, right? And
I heard at a conference, the most beautiful thing is like the speaker closed with like, if you ever find yourself lost or off the path, all you need to know is that it just takes 12 steps to get back to us.
I remember that. Yeah.
Like, I heard it and I was like, wow. That's like, I'm okay. But that's it. It just takes 12 steps to get back to you.
I love that.
I really do love that. I remember that. Gosh, what a wonderful topic.
Yeah.
I know. It's like, when are you coming back? I was thinking about that.
There's so much more, right?
Of course.
So much more. And I think it's such a broad topic. And, I think for those of us who have been suffering from alcohol and we're out there using, we don't necessarily take good care of our bodies, right? And so that also is another learning experience, like good nutrition, hydration, sleep, all of those, like the big trifecta, right?
Yeah.
And exercise and things that, we don't want to do. But,
you know what I was just thinking of while you were talking was how wonderful would it be if so one of my favorite Buddhist ideas is the biggest illusion is that we are somehow different from each other. We're actually not, right?
Right.
And how wonderful would it be if all of the drama and troubles we had, they were floating over our heads so everybody could see them, so we could see everybody else's stuff. And we would realize that actually no one's got any of this shit figured out.
Nobody does.
No one does, regardless of what they look like or what they sound like. No one has it figured out. We're all basically we're all suffering. We're all suffering, and maybe some of us are pretending not to be suffering.
We're all just walking each other home. And
I think that's exactly
in the terms of Ram Dass, right?
Yeah. All of bozos on the fucking bus.
Bozos on the bus. I'm way in the back of the bus. Probably smoking a cigarette and having a Twinkie.
Then I must be hanging out of the window.
Right. And I'm crying. And we're trying to and then there's someone's fighting to drive the bus, and like there's the sober ones of us are like, no, let God drive. And then you've got somebody saying, no, I can do it better than God.
This conversation was a great way to start this month of talking about mind and body, but also I see the connection to like the last 3 episodes, because we spent all that time speaking about making amends to the body, and I think that all of this is, all that we're doing, anything that is good, that is allowing us to kind of clear that smoky veil away from what's the truth, is making amends for ourselves.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
I love that description, the smoky veil.
Yeah, I was like trying to be all colorful.
Yeah, you got it. You nailed it. Yeah.
Yeah, you did a great job, Louis.
Thank you.
Totally,
I'm looking.
Totally.
Nothing but the best. Nothing but the best. I want to impress you.
You what? It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. Again, Anke, thank you so much for coming on.
I know. Thank you.
This was quite wonderful.
This has been a full journey, hero's journey moment for me that I got to be here, from seeing Louis fangirling him in the street and then now actually being on the podcast. Like, who would have thunk it?
Well, see, now I'm going to be fangirling.
Yeah, and we've grown so much since we shared this. We had 120% growth in this last year.
Fantastic.
So we are continuing to grow, and I think this last year we were listened to in 23 different countries. And
how cool is that?
Yeah,
Wow.
overall it was over 30. So in our lifespan, we've been listened to in 36 different countries.
Well, I'll know we're successful when we're dubbed.
And then in the United States, we're listened to the last time I looked in 598 different cities. So
I love that.
Yeah, so we're growing, and I like to think that's more people who might be struggling with addiction, maybe hearing something that they need, and if they're listening to this now, and they feel like they're overwhelmed. You're not alone.
We're
you
here
are not.
for you.
Yes, exactly.
You're not alone.
And I also think I think Bonnie Violet's doing some like marketing, isn't she? Like
she's on her. Yeah,
on the information superhighway.
Yeah, she is.
Yes,
She is doing. We're not on camera.
Yeah.
No. You just keep looking at the camera. That's why I was looking over there. No. Yeah, she is doing some marketing. She's been doing some great work for us. She's definitely has expanded the different. She's expanded on YouTube. She's done stuff on there. She's done our shorts. She's
the reason why people are coming up to me saying I'm a YouTube star.
Yeah, she's She's really she's really brilliant. And then she also has her dragon spirituality thing that she's been doing. She just had another successful year recently.
And her Splinter Grace podcast. She has a Splinter Grace podcast.
That's the one she does with her aunt.
Yeah, it's like that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
You know what's really interesting? I do that my Louis agenda, and she used to watch my Louis agenda, and she started doing during the shelter in place, walking along and doing hers. And I was always encouraging everybody, do your thing.
Yeah.
Because like as much as we feel what we feel about social media, we have to grab it back and take it and make it work for us.
I like that. I like that. I recently did like my top 3 favorite books. Nice. And I posted it on Facebook.
You guys are so bold. I just social media. I'm telling you.
What's the fear?
Oh, I think it's more than Brandon looks up. Brandon's like, I don't know that we have the time. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. I can estimate. For me, I think. Brandon, you know what? I think it's time to wrap up. I think it's time.